I'm hearing from builders a lot, and it's one of these issues that as you become a little bit more known amongst the community, I'm hearing from more and more builders about these particular issues and the cost of building.
I do believe when it comes to the building industry, we need to get politicians or decision makers on the ground, like having roundtable discussions with like people that are doing this stuff every single day, because there is so many ways that we can reduce costs in our building industry.
Yeah. Do you have to deal with federal laws as well as state laws as well as council laws?
Building codes, yeah.
Yeah, three bloody levels of government for a country the size of 27 million people.
Our industry, there is so much room for improvement and so many areas that can get more efficient, which I believe will bring the cost of housing down. G'day guys, welcome back to another episode of Level Up. We are back in the shed today for another cracking episode. And I must say, I don't get nervous too often doing a podcast. I'm a little bit nervous to be speaking to the guests we got on here today, because today we have our first politician to have a chat to. And a lot of you guys will know because you reached out to me and you kept sending me links to posts that our guest today was posting. And I follow him as well, and I'm very passionate about what he does. So big warm welcome to Senator Gerard Rennick. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good, thanks, Duayne. How are you?
Very well, mate. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to come and have a chat.
No, you're welcome.
Obviously, we didn't get a real good result on the weekend, but I'm sure we'll keep pushing on and see what happens.
Yeah.
Mate, I love your passion. Like you're all data. Like I love seeing your videos on social media, and you're just facts. And I think that's what we need in politics, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we need it in the politicians themselves rather than the bureaucracy or anywhere else, because the problem with politics is it's driven by emotion and fear rather than facts and figures. And unfortunately, I think Australia's all the worse off because of it, because many of the colleagues that I used to work with or, other politicians, they don't have the skill set to sit down and analyse data, and as a result of that, they have to over-rely on their bureaucrats or their staff, many of whom half their age and have come through university with no real life experience themselves. And we saw that on the weekend with the Liberal Party, who, I can speak from experience because I was inside the parliamentary wing for 5 years, effectively had no vision for the country. They had a few tepid economic policies, but nothing of serious structural reform. And in the end, people ended up going back to Albanese, as hard as that is to believe, just because he exuded more confidence, and he did do, he offered some discounts to HECS and some other measures that were going to make a difference to people in terms of cost of living. So, we really do have a lack of a knowledge crisis, if you want to call it that, inside the parliamentary wing of Parliament House.
What's your opinion, mate? I see, like even in the States and that, we've seen it over the last probably 10 or so years, but there seems to be a big influence now in a lot of elections on young people, and it worries me because they get sucked in by like one or two policies that sound great to them, but they don't know the full behind the scenes or the full story of it. But there's all these other policies that actually mean a lot more and will help the country, but they get sucked into these little ones and I feel like there's a lot of politicians out there that's how they get in, because of all these younger voters that don't really have a clue, really, like what's going on.
Well, look, I think you've been a bit harsh there on the younger voters. Look, I mean, there's a range of knowledge, and across all age groups. Some younger voters are well educated and when I say educated in politics in the terms of they know what the various parties stand for, and others aren't. Yeah. I mean, I've had people in their 60s and 70s ask how to vote, and not understand the difference between a lower house green card and an upper house white card. The difference between preferential voting and optional preferential and things like that. So I'm very reluctant to make generalisations about any particular. That's why we call the party I lead people first, because I don't want to start slicing the human race up by various attitudes, age, gender, race, whatever. I think that's one of the easy things that many of my colleagues do, is that they love to start the conquer and divide things. So. Look, and look, the environment's a good one, right? I mean, we're all worried about carbon dioxide, heating the planet, or supposedly, but we focus just on carbon dioxide whilst ignoring the impacts of lithium mining, rare earth mining, building, wind turbines or whatever and knocking down the tops of mountain ranges to put up wind turbines, and then the consequences on the bird life, etc., and the bat life. Bats are a very big pollinator of plants, as you probably know. So you're right. Like, it's very easy. It's called framing, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
And it was when I lived in New South Wales, I did a political campaigning course that went for 9 months, the first Saturday of every month for 9 months. And, the first thing we were taught about was framing. And you frame on your strengths, and then you sort of try not to talk about the other issues. So, and that's what... Yeah, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, like, I'm very keen to talk to you about the sustainable stuff, because I love again, how you speak about all that, but like you just said, like, how is it sustainable when you're knocking down forest and clearing mountains, and like the infrastructure they have to put in to build these things to start with is just disgraceful to the environment.
Oh, absolutely. And this is, yet again, when it comes back to the framing, the alarmists, I'll call them climate alarmists, don't focus on the damage that you're doing to the environment. And yet they've got everyone, transfixed at this carbon dioxide. They call it, poisoning or a toxin or whatever. But yet that's the most renewable form of energy is photosynthesis, converting carbon dioxide and water into sugar and oxygen. If you did your biology at high school, you know that. And yet somehow, something that, is naturally produced, I think there's 800 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide produced, so that's 8 by 10 to the power of 11, produced by Mother Nature every year, and mankind produces about 35 billion tonnes of it, so a small slither, about 4%. So it's, the Earth's emitting carbon dioxide all the time.
Even without us?
Even without us, absolutely. And there's a sink. So, and here's one of the things I've picked up in estimates over the years. The biggest carbon sink on the Earth is actually photosynthesis photoplankton in the ocean, and that's not even included in the net zero models. So the net zero models are only based on land use, what's absorbed on the land and what's emitted on land. So they ignore the fact that your biggest carbon sink is actually offshore in the ocean, i.e. photoplankton. And there was a good article in the ABC just after the bushfires in 2020 where it said there was a photoplankton bloom in the Southern Ocean as a result of the bushfires. All that smoke got blown out to the Southern Ocean, ended settling up, in the ocean, and then the photoplankton bloomed. And it's no different to when it rains and we have the grass grow. I don't need to tell you if you're living up here, when it rains in the summertime, the grass just grows at a rate of knots. You're mowing every weekend. Well, it's the same. We have natural stabilisers in our earth anyway, that will deal with increased levels of carbon dioxide.
So what's behind them pushing all this renewable stuff? Because, like, I don't know, I'm definitely not up to speed with all of it, but like from my little knowledge that I have and the, I guess, common sense, to me it just doesn't work. Like,
well, look, I'm of the same view. I mean, what's behind it? One of the things we taught very early on you're not allowed to do in the Senate is impute motive. So call them saying, "Oh, you're trying to, destroy the planet or destroy the energy grid or something like that." Look, I don't know. Well, look, I don't know what was behind it initially. I know what's behind it now is that a large number of people are involved in the renewable industry. So a lot of people out there, and I call them rent seekers, are making a lot of money out of this. That's what's behind it. It's just like financial planning industry now, whereby once upon a time, people, if they had savings, would pay off their mortgage and then they'd put money in a bank account and earn money on their term deposit. Now you're forced to put your money into superannuation. There's all these rules around super, so you've created a whole new battalion of financial engineers that, yet again, we don't need. 34, prior to 1992, people just saved for their own retirement. If you didn't have enough assets, you'd go on the pension. But ultimately, you took responsibility for your own savings. Today, we have $3 trillion in superannuation under management, just in industry and retail funds that are managed by other people that, in Sydney and Melbourne, in the ivory palaces of Sydney and Melbourne, who basically, don't take any accountability if they lose your money, but they're skimming out $30 billion a year in fees out of superannuation. Oh, right. So that's another industry that's just, come from nowhere in the last 30 or 40 years that didn't exist once upon a time. But good luck trying to kill it, because when you're up against $30 or $40 billion in fees, and this money, goes to these people and then they use it to fight you back, it's very hard it's going to be a hard industry to curtail, similar to renewables.
A little bit off topic, mate, but have you heard of a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island?
Yeah, I've read it. Yeah, I know it very well. Yeah, I understand, yeah. That's the monetary system. Yeah.
Yeah, or just when you're talking about how they've set up these new businesses around super and stuff like that, just takes me straight back to that book and how everything's had a bit
I
of
can give you a whole episode on that book if you like. Yeah.
Well, we haven't. We've only got a limited amount of time, but I've mentioned that book a few times on the podcast, and a few people reached out and said, "Holy shit!" Like that was eye-opening. But it definitely changed the way. It probably played a big part in opening up my mind to how I look at renewable energy and super and money and all that kind of stuff. But it really does blow my mind. But with the people that are getting behind this renewable energy and that sort of thing, and think that it's great, like I don't know, do they overlook all the clearing of the forests and all the other stuff that has to go in to actually be able to build that those farms and the turbines and all the other things that are all the other things around the planet that are getting destroyed to produce that, I guess?
Oh, absolutely, they'll overlook it, and they deliberately overlook it because it doesn't suit their narrative. Yeah. And it's that simple. I mean, and that's why we have lack ethics. Australia is, and many Western countries have a real ethical crisis in their leadership ranks, not just in government but in private industry and right across the board. And we saw that. I know we don't want to go here, but we saw that with the COVID crisis when people were being injured by the vaccines. It doesn't matter what you think about vaccines. People were being injured and gaslighted, and that's probably another thing when I went into government. The lack of quality assurance. If you get it wrong, in your industry, if you get it wrong, you can be sued. Quality assurance, capital management, quality assurance are king, right? You have to, maintain safety standards, or you'll be sued. Or even if you're sued and you win, you'll still have your reputation damaged. Yeah. In politics, it's not you on the line. And this is where I sort of got off the, sort of 18 months into it. I think I had my epiphany there where I just thought, we are destroying people's lives here through what we do, and there's no conscience. There's no conscience in politics that goes, what we're doing, is this right? And that's what really annoys me, is that everyone is just fighting for the here and now and trying to score that political point for the 24-hour news cycle instead of actually looking down the track and saying, well, how's this going to help our children into the future? And that's what we did in the 80s. I mean, I'll look back now, you go back to the monetary policy. Keating lifted capital controls in 1985, and he basically said, we're not going to stop private banks in Australia from borrowing money from offshore. So, from a financial point of view, that's similar to an immigration point of view, whereby the government just said, we're not going to have immigration controls. Now, if the government said that, people would be down in Parliament House with pitchforks saying, this isn't on, you've got to have immigration controls. We just can't have people coming in willy-nilly. But that's what we did in our financial markets in 1985. Yeah. And that then, the four major banks had $8 billion in foreign debt in 1985. By 2008, they had $800 billion in foreign debt. That money was just lent to Australians to buy houses. So you just inflated the price of a house. But here's the thing, it wasn't tied to someone's earning capacity or savings capacity, the older generation. We just inflated the bubble. So if you've got a couple of boys and you might pay them $5 a week to rake the lawn, and they go to a comic book shop, the most they can pay is $5 because that's all they've got. But if you turn around and lend them 20, that comic book, they could pay $25 for the same comic book. The comic book isn't worth any more or less, but they've now got 4 weeks of debt rather than no debt. And that's what Keating did. I mean, in the old days, so for your listeners, I used to work at the Bank of Queensland. When I was there, I was a Treasury accountant there. For every $1 million we'd lend out to a house, only $400,000 came from Australia. For $600,000, like we'd go and tap the foreign capital markets for the other $600,000. So that was as a result of what Keating did in 1985. So if he hadn't have done what he'd done, we would have only been able to lend for $400,000. But that $400,000 comes from older generation savings, right? So what we were doing, what used to happen before Keating just let go of capital controls, was that the price of a house was tied to our savings. Yeah. And it was a virtuous cycle whereby the older people would put their money in a term deposit. The bank would lend it on to the younger generation. The younger generation pays the interest back to the bank, who pays it back to the older generation, so that the money stayed within the system. Today, over half the money that you pay on interest on your house is going offshore, tax-free, I might add, because there's a section in the Tax Act that says foreign banks don't have to pay tax on interest they earn here. So we are just bleeding money offshore. And it's similar to the renewable industry, right?
Yeah.
70%, yeah. So we are now shutting down our locally sourced coal. We won't touch uranium, so we won't touch nuclear. We've sold most of our gas reserves offshore, or, at foreign, and we now import foreign-made renewables that are 70% owned by foreigners. So
what's your view on all the like Australia has so much resource. What's your view on what's going to happen in the future? Like, I reckon we're going to get to a point where we're going to have to start buying the shit back, and it's going to cost us more money.
Well, we are buying it back, and we're at the point now we've got to buy gas back because the state, Queensland Queensland has got a gas reservation policy now, but we sold a lot of the gas offshore without any, because back when we just relied on coal, but of course now we're not building any more coal-powered fire stations, right? Coal-fired power stations. So. And the other thing is that New South Wales and Victoria, have a moratorium on drilling for gas onshore. So we're no longer drilling for gas onshore either. So Queensland's exporting most of what they, get out of the ground. I think we do have a recently Senex or someone had to do a gas reservation policy. So we are doing that now, but we do it in manufacturing as well. I mean, that was another 1985 decision, the Button Plan that allowed manufacturing. We lifted tariffs and said we can't compete anymore in manufacturing, so we're just going to let it go. Well, it wasn't that we let it go offshore, we just got rid of all tariffs.
Yeah.
And, the problem is, it's good that we do buy cheaper goods and services, but that's only good provided we're paying our own way. So if we eventually, and this is the problem, you get to the point whereby eventually, if you're not producing the goods and services that you're importing, then and you're not making something here to pay for it, you're borrowing the stuff to pay for it. So we're going backwards that way. So what's worse is if we produce it ourselves and buy it ourselves, we go back to that bank situation where at least keeping the money in our country. But when we go, well, we're not going to build anything anymore, and suddenly we stop generating income on ourselves, but we're still importing goods. All the money we do make out of the mining industry, for example, just goes back offshore because we spend it all offshore.
Yeah.
We're not reinvesting it into our own country or further. It's not just a financial transaction. It's also a skills-based transaction.
Yeah.
So we've de-skilled our country now, and now we have to rely on immigrants to come in and do the jobs. And and a lot of those skills we've gone from people, whereby. So I was born 1970. My sister was born 1964. When she graduated in 1981, so she started high school in 77, she started with 4 classes in chinchilla. By the time she finished in 1981 in grade 12, she was half a class because all the men left school in grade 9, 10, 11, 12 to get apprenticeships, right? Whereas today, most, not all, but the majority of students go on to go to university, they get a degree, and then they come out and they're financial planners or something. They're being financial engineers instead of mechanical engineers or civil engineers. So we're not actually, maintaining those skills that will enable us to add value here in this country.
Mate, I think the skills thing. I'm not sure 100 like on other parts of Australia, but here in southeast Queensland, like I run a quite successful building business, and and I have a training business that helps hundreds of builders across Australia and New Zealand. And every single builder I know, every trade I know is screaming. Like every single person I know in the industry at the moment could easily employ another 1 to probably 3 people.
Yeah.
And we can't get them. Apprentices are like we used to put an ad out for an apprentice and you'd get a couple of dozen references. Yeah. Now we put one out and you're lucky to get 1. And 9 times out of 10, the only way they come through is if a friend of a friend or something like that. But like we're in that scenario now. Like we physically cannot keep up. Like every builder I know cannot keep up with the amount of work they've got on. I know a few bigger builders that do a lot of volume work, like 200-300 homes a year.
Yeah.
They are almost at standstills because they can't. There's no land getting released, so they've actually got no land to build houses that they're selling on.
Yeah.
And yet we haven't even started building all this infrastructure for the Olympics yet.
Yeah.
And they're trying to tell. Like see all these things that they're trying to say that we're going to need an extra 38,000 workers each year for the next 10 years to be able to keep up with the number of houses we need and stuff. I don't know where they're coming from. Like we haven't got them now. So where are they all of a sudden going to appear from?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I think you mentioned it before we started recording. Like a lot of immigrants that come in are skilled.
Yeah.
But they don't necessarily make it to us. Like I hear lots of stories that they end up on these big like infrastructure projects and things, and that's no good for us. Like,
Yeah, well, that's a good point, because this is where bring renewables back into it. So there's about 10,000. So we've got 500,000 immigrants. That's come back down to 380, but it wasn't that long ago we had 500,000 for the 12-month period. Of that, only 10,000 came in on the 482 visa, which I'm led to believe is a building visa. But the point is, the number of houses built in Australia fell, despite the fact, forget relative percentages and everything, despite the fact we had supposedly 10,000 more tradies in the country. So the question is, why is the number of new houses falling? Now, there's there's obviously issues like builders going bankrupt and that. But I'm hearing too that a lot of these people coming in are going on these renewables projects. Yeah. So that's part of the reason why we've actually got a housing crisis as well, is that a lot of tradies are actually going on these on renewable projects. So I've heard of 300 Filipinos coming in and building the transmission line between South Australia and New South Wales around Wagga area. So they're now pulling the trades. As you say, we've got a dearth of trades because not as many people do an apprenticeship anymore anyway. But the guys that are coming in aren't actually coming in building houses. They're building transmission lines, wind turbines, solar farms, or engaged in lithium mining or something like that.
And we can't compete, mate. Like I actually know a couple of Sparkies, a couple of Concretes that are working on the, I think it's a big wind farm out near Warwick now. And so the money they get out there is double to triple what they get working in the building industry, building homes. So as long as they keep pushing to do that work, people are always going to chase the bigger money, and that's just going to put more pressure on us, which is going to drive the cost of housing up, not down. Like we've actually seen a big spike in, like we employ our own team, so we've got quite a large team of carpenters. We do a lot of work ourselves, and we've seen a lot of pressure in the last 6 months on us having to keep putting our wages up for our team, because otherwise we keep losing them. And like when I tell the homeowners, like we got a homeowner at the moment that's quite a large businessman, and he's in the know, and he likes knowing things, and we have some good conversations. And when I tell him the rates and what we're paying carpenters, concreters, electricians, he just falls over. He's like, how is that sustainable? I'm like, well, it's not, but if people want houses built and I need to employ them and I got to get the work done, that's what I got to pay.
That's right.
So that's all getting passed on, obviously. Which is pushing the price of housing up.
And so that's the thing. Like we do need to change the mix, as I mentioned before. With superannuation, $30 billion worth of fees there. There's a lot of people working in the finance industry that don't need to be working in the finance industry. We need to strip that right out. Get rid of poker machines. I read an article a couple of years ago. There's something like 200,000 people in New South Wales work in the poker machine industry. When I grew up in Queensland, we didn't have poker machines. I'm not against poker machines in casinos. You have a few casinos and whatever, but you don't need them in every sporting club or every pub, right? But yet again, you've got these people sitting there. None of this stuff's value add. Childcare industry, it's not value add. Get grandma to look after the kids or your family and friends. It's academia. So many more people are going to university, and so you're not just training more people to do those, becoming economists and those sort of soft skill jobs that aren't adding value. You're taking another 4 years of their life working career. So, on average, you might work, so let's say 40 years, you graduate at 18, and let's say take a couple of years off backpack and whatever. But, on average, let's assume it's a 40-year working life. If you're wasting another 4 years at university, that's 10% off your working career. So, these are the things where people are falling behind.
It's unbelievable. I get frustrated when I see like we keep coming back to the renewable stuff, but like power has gone up. Like everyone's power bills are costing more. But as a builder, like it makes my blood boil. Like when I think back, like 20 years ago when I was an apprentice, 24 years ago. And like houses were so much more simple. Like everyone just had what they needed. Like might have been a double garage, might have had 2 bathrooms, or maybe a bathroom and an ensuite. Every room had one sort of batten holder in the middle. Like the fittings and the fixtures were very basic. But everyone loved it. Everyone loved their homes and everyone enjoyed it. Whereas now, like we build homes and it's nothing to have over 100 downlights in a house. Like, and so it frustrates me when I see people complaining about the cost of their power bills, yet everyone wants the entire house air conditioned. Everyone wants 3 bedrooms, 3 garages, multi-purpose rooms. They all want 2 or 3 ovens and all the flash shit in the kitchen. But then just something like as simple as lighting,
Yeah.
like if you've got 4 downlights in every bedroom, like even though they're LEDs and they're supposedly using less power, like you've got 3 to 4 times the amount of lights that we had in
Yeah.
houses only 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So I don't know if politicians dig this deep into things, but it's,
Well, I mean, I am aware. I know there's more higher standards now around the type of glass you use, insulation. I'm also led to believe there's now standards for NDIS whereby you've got to have a wheelchair access.
Yep.
Is that correct? You've got to have
Yeah.
wheelchair access
So
on every house, or is
all houses now have to be built for future. So
Right.
wider doorways, less fresh thresholds inside to outside, so wheelchair friendly.
Yeah.
Bathrooms. So depending on the type of job and whether it's renovation, new build or whatever, but you're supposed to have at least one accessible bathroom. And so I don't think that's a bad thing, but I do think it's a little bit, like on a new build, it doesn't add any cost if it's thought about at the beginning. But
Yeah.
where it does add costs is like renovations and things, if these things are getting added along the way and they become variations. But I don't think that's a bad thing. The glass thing is a frustrating one.
Right.
Because even with like every house has to have an energy efficiency test done on it.
Yeah.
And if you just go with the tick and flick model, they're not getting the best outcome. And 9 times out of 10, they're assessing the entire house as one block.
Yeah.
Whereas if you pay, and that energy efficiency test might cost $400 to $600. It's just a tick and flick type thing, but it ticks all the boxes and you get your house approved.
Yeah.
Whereas if you spend $2,000 to $3,000 and you get an actual, like you talk about with data and science, you get someone to do an energy efficiency test that actually takes into account north, south, east, west, sun up, sun down, overhang, shading, all those types of things. Like you might end up with double or triple glazing windows on one side of the house and the rest of the house might be able to go back to single glazing and all those types of things. Whereas the tick and flick box that everyone does just puts the same envelope over the entire house, which is adding cost as well. Because we find we talk our clients into going with the better energy efficiency test, and we're actually finding that we're taking things out of the house that they're not needed. So there's a lot of like our industry, there is so much room for improvement and so many areas that can get more efficient, which I believe will bring the cost of housing down. It's just that I don't know how you get involved in these discussions. That I do believe when it comes to the building industry, we need to get politicians or decision makers on the ground, like having roundtable discussions with like people that are doing this stuff every single day, because there is so many ways that we can reduce cost in our building industry.
It's and look, I know it's a state government that generally tends to make the laws, but it's an issue federally as well, because the cost of housing is, we need to build a lot more new houses very fast to deal with the immigrants that have already come in. Notwithstanding, we should lower the immigration rate, but it's a real issue, and I'm hearing from builders a lot, and it's one of these issues that as you become a little bit more known amongst the community, I'm hearing from more and more builders about these particular issues and the cost of building. So that's a real concern.
And it is like it's across the there's not just one thing. Like so many things affect our industry. Like we're very big on data and tracking data, and like through COVID, yes, there was a lot of price increases and materials and stuff went through the roof, but no one was talking about like transport and deliveries and the cost of diesel and stuff. And like we went on an average, like I shouldn't say average because most of the jobs we do are more higher end, but like we went from say an average delivery. Most of our deliveries used to be between, say, $110 and $160, and it really didn't matter what it was. They were just working on volume. And then by the end of COVID, like it was nothing. For that same $110 delivery was all of a sudden $400 to $600. Like we're paying, if we want to bring a pallet of tiles up from Melbourne, like those deliveries went from sort of $600 or $700, some of them up to $3,000. And so there's all these costs, obviously, that all get passed on. But in the building industry, there's a lot of people all grabbing a piece of the pie.
I mean, there's a lot of people, that's a lot of industries. But can I just ask, so how long does it take you to build a house from scratch? So just a standard house, how long would it take you to build a standard house, and how many people builders would it take to do that? Assuming, I'll split that into two parts. One, getting all the approvals and regulations from the council, step one. So you're ready to start building, and then step two to actually build.
If you're talking, like if you talk just an average, say 4-bedroom, just an average
Yep.
family home, from the client choosing the builder, the design, getting all the approvals, like that approval design phase can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, right.
And then if it's a built efficiently, you'll build it in 6 months. But and to build the house, by the time you add up all the different trade, like if we're just talking to people on site physically building the house,
Yeah.
on most of our jobs, mate, there would be close to probably 80 to 100 people on each home.
Wow. Over that but not consecutively for 6 months. That's including plumbers that might come in
that's
for a couple
everyone.
of weeks, and then electricians.
So there'll be days where there's 8, 12, 14 people on site.
Jeez. Yeah, right.
Like if you're at a roughing stage and you got the plumbers, the sparkies, the aircon, like it's easy to have 10 to 12 people on a site.
Yeah, right.
But if you add up across the job, like all the trades that are involved to build a house, there's probably in excess of 100 people.
Yeah, right. Okay. And so what's your standard bog standard 4-bedroom, 2-car garage? What's the cost now? Could you get built for less than $500,000?
You can still build houses for less than $500,000, but you won't get a lot of house.
Right.
Like one of my other big things, which I'd love to talk to you more about at some point, like I'm really pushing for builders to be separated. So at the moment, builders are just all thrown in the one hat.
Right.
So whether you're a one-man band that builds 1 or 2 jobs a year, whether you're a builder that maybe has a team of 15 to 20 blokes, turns over $10 million, whether you're a residential volume builder, whether you're a resi builder that does multi-rise, whether you're a tier 1 that does high-rise, commercial, like we're all in the one box.
Yep.
And I believe that volume builders, I think it should be, say, 20 million. Any builder that turns over more than 20 million should go and play in the big field.
Yeah.
And all of us smaller builders that are more custom builders, family-run businesses and things, we need to be separated.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, we all have to deal with the exact same rules, regulations.
Yep.
And again, you want to talk about the cost of housing. If I'll put my hand up, we do not comply with everything we have to do.
Right.
And if we tried to, it would probably add another 15 to 20% to the cost of our builds.
Yeah.
Like if we were to comply with everything, we would have traffic control on most of our jobs every single day.
Yeah.
One day of traffic control on a job site's $2,500.
Yeah, right.
You add that up over a 6-month period.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So work-life health and safety says that any time we have a concrete pump, a concrete truck, a crane, a delivery, we're supposed to have traffic control on site.
Yeah, right.
We don't do that. We do it if we do it in certain situations, if it's near a school or main road or whatever.
Yeah.
But there is no way in the world that I can afford to do that, and there's no way my clients would pay to do that.
Yeah.
And then you got all the safety stuff that I believe we run a pretty tight ship. Like our employees are number one. We want everyone to go home safety, and we do go out of our way to make sure they're safe.
Yeah.
But again, I'll put my hand up. We definitely do. There's things that we do in our job sites that aren't meeting the rules.
Yeah.
I'm old school. I think there's a lot of common sense in my business.
Yep.
I also believe that a lot of safety has gone overboard, and it's actually causing more accidents.
Yeah.
Like when I was an apprentice, mate, like you walked around the top plate of a 3-story building and you just knew you had to be safe. You had to think about what you're doing. You had to be organised. You had to make sure you had someone working with you. Whereas now, everyone just expects there to always be a handrail or always be a platform that if they fall, they're going to land on. So again, I could bang on all day about this stuff. But
Yeah, so they plan for every contingency. It's like the wheelchair access in every house. You shouldn't have to build one unless you actually decide to buy a house and you're in a wheelchair. You know what I mean? Like there's not 20 million people in this country that's going to need a wheelchair. So why build houses for 20 million people with the potential that they may have a wheelchair? But that's what they do, right? They're always trying to suit. And this is not just in the building industry. This is the problem with the bureaucracy when it gets out of control, right? It's a hammer looking for the nail. Yeah. So of course, they go into work every week. They create a rule last week, and they've done that. Now they've got to find another rule, and that one's just a classic example. It's can't imagine how much extra that costs.
I got a call. There's a new some guys up here in Sunshine Coast have started. It's called the Good Builder. It's like media type company, they're putting out good news articles about the industry, and I think it's fantastic. And they're getting good results. But they rang me up around, I think it was around January or something. There was a new policy that came out about there was some grant that they wanted to give out to apprentices.
Yeah.
And they rang me up to see what my thoughts were on it, and it was supposed to be aimed at trying to. They've done some stats, and I think it's come up that a lot of people are leaving their apprenticeship by the time they finish their second year.
Yeah.
And so I forget the name of the grant, but they're trying to bring this grant in to encourage people with dollars to hang around and finish their apprenticeship. And they asked me what my opinion was, and I was like, well, number one, it shouldn't just be given to them, because like we really struggle with apprentices. Like we can have an apprentice, they change it all. Like in the old days, we used to have to give them their tool allowance, and 9 times out of 10, bosses would go and meet them at the tool shop. We'd load them up with everything they needed, and we'd pay for it and all that sort of stuff. But now you're seeing apprentices get to the end of their time, and they've still only got a nail bag and a hammer. Like they haven't spent money on what they need to spend the money on to be able to do their job correctly.
Right.
Which then puts a lot of pressure on the other tradies and the rest of the team on site, because they're using all their gear.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I piped up and I said, well, the best thing you could do would be to do a deal with the employer that they can supply them the gear they need to be able to do their job adequately. Or I said, even better, do additional training for them. Because a really bad thing in the building industry, and this is why I'm so passionate and why I have my training business now, because I've done all the hard yards, I've been through the shit. To get your builder's license, you only have to do a 3-day business course. And so there's thousands of incredible builders and tradies out there that can build an incredible product, but they don't know how to run a business. And that was me. Yeah. And so I feel like, I'm not sure if you're in this part of it, but politicians a lot of the time are throwing money at our industry to encourage people to get into it. But the people that are in it don't know how to run businesses effectively or efficiently, or they don't understand their data, their numbers and all that type of thing. And that was me. Like I was in that cycle for 10, 12 years, nearly went bankrupt 3 times before I woke up to myself. And it's only from spending a shitload of time, money and energy on personal development and learning more that I'm addicted to it now. I just want to know more. Yeah. But again, even in that side of things, there are so many areas that the government could help out to add efficiency that, again, would help reduce the cost of housing. Yeah. It's, I don't know, I could talk your ear off all day about it. But mate, can we go back a little bit just before we wrap it up to, like, how did you get into politics? Because you're a very passionate person, and I'm pretty blown away by your knowledge.
Look, it's a long story. Well, I say it's a long story. I guess it's the story of my life. So I'll just start with the beginning. Born in Chinchilla in 1970. Went to high school in Chinchilla before finishing Toowoomba for 2 years. Got a Bachelor of Commerce at UQ. Went back to Dalby for 3 years. Then went overseas for what I thought was 2 years. Came and ended up spending 7 years overseas. So from the age of 23 to 30, I was overseas. Had a ball over there. Came back and worked in Brisbane for 6 years with the Bank of Queensland. And when I was there, I actually started off studying biochemistry, hence my interest in the biochemistry, the mRNA vaccine. But then the bank said to me, if you're going to study, you've got to study finance. So, and that just happened to coincide when I was given the role of Treasury Accountant at the BOQ. So from there, I got a Master's of Applied Finance and then went to Sydney, where I worked for Westfield. And Bank of Queensland had about 5 subsidiaries. Westfield had about 800. So I was fascinated by this. So I went and did a Master's of Tax Law down there. So it was when I was doing my Master's of Tax Law at Sydney University, one night at a lecture, they were talking about this thing called the public offer test. And what it said was that if you issued a bond in the primary market, you wouldn't have to pay withholding tax. Now, the average Joe Blow on the street would not have a clue what that means, right? But what it meant was that the only people that issue bonds in the primary market are either big banks or big companies, right? And the sort of people that pay withholding tax are foreigners. So I knew straight away that meant that foreign companies don't have to pay tax on the interest that we pay them. So I'm thinking my mum was still alive then. I'm thinking, well, hang on, mum pays tax on her interest. We all pay tax on our income. But foreigners don't have to pay tax on income they earn here. And that just really put a, bloody, bee up my backside. So anyway, long story short, as I looked into it further throughout that whole Masters of Tax Law, the entire tax act, as we talked about earlier, the renewables industry, monetary policy, it favoured foreign investors over domestic investors. So it's very hard to compete with a foreign company if you're an Australian company, if the foreign company's only paying half the rate of tax as you are, right? So because they can charge less, right? I guess that was when I thought, I'm going to have to do something about this. And now I lived in North Sydney, so that was in Joe Hockey. He was the member for North Sydney. So I joined the Liberal Party and, over a couple of years got to know him, but, had the opportunity to speak about it to him. And when I was trying to explain it to him, it just went straight over his head, and I just realised, well, God, this is the shadow treasurer, and he doesn't get it. And I realised I can add value here in running for politics. Anyway, long story short, and it wasn't just that, it's the entire, the tax act is just full of loopholes. It's so bad. But so when we came back, we had our first son in Brisbane, and then my wife lives just close to here, actually, or grew up close to here. So we came back to Brisbane, and my wife's former employer wanted her to keep working, and I was like, that's fine. I'll stay home, look after the young boys. I loved bringing up the kids. I still do. And then I thought, well, I'll do something. I'll have a crack for politics while I, stay at home and look after the boys. So I spent about 3 years within the Liberal Party, just constantly going to every event to try and get pre-selected for the Senate. Long story short, I did get pre-selected for the Senate. And then I've tried to use my tax knowledge, my knowledge in monetary policy and tax, because I learn a lot too. The Bank of Queensland, this probably won't mean much to your listeners, but I brought in this accounting standard called IAS 39, which had to bring all the derivatives on the balance sheet. So when I said before about Paul Keating in 1985, opened up the capital markets and let all this foreign debt in, domestic banks borrow US dollar bonds. The bonds that are denominated in US dollars. So you have to switch them out into Aussies. So that means you've got to take out cross-currency swaps, and then the bonds are fixed. So then you've got to swap them back into variable, because most home loans in Australia are variable. Very few people fix. Some do, about 20, 30% of the market fixes. So you've got all these risks, cross-currency swap risks, interest rates, swap risks, all this stuff. So we had to bring all those derivatives. So I understand capital markets and monetary policy as well. So I guess that's my, if I don't get back in, that's going to be the real frustration, because no one down there, it's like you're saying about the building industry, right? Unless you've come from that industry and you've obviously spent 25 years in it, it sounds like you know it very, very well. That's how I feel about tax and monetary policy. I understand it, and literally, with the exception of one or two people, no one else understands it. And the shame about it is that we are bleeding billions of dollars a year, letting money go offshore. I'll give you one example. Like in 2022, Pfizer made $1.4 billion in sales here on their vaccine, right?
Australia?
Yeah, yep. They transferred $1 billion offshore to Ireland in royalty fees. Now, Ireland didn't manufacture those vaccines, right? But here's the thing, they got a billion dollar tax deduction here, so they saved paying $300 million in company tax. Now, there's a withholding tax rate on royalties paid to Ireland of 10 cents, so we got 100 million of that back. So we lost $200 million. Ireland, because it has a company tax rate of 12.5 cents, picked up 125 million bucks, and Pfizer was 75 million bucks better off for doing a deal for just a couple of book entries, right? Now, that's the sort of stuff that grinds my gears, because we are encouraging profits to go offshore. And, if that wasn't so much big pharma, we don't have a lot of big pharma here, but similar with BHP and Rio and Fortescue Metal, about a decade ago, they'd set up marketing hubs in Singapore, and they were paying Singapore these massive charges for marketing because Singapore had a company tax rate of 10 cents. Now, Singapore doesn't know a thing about marketing iron ore. They don't have iron ore in Singapore, but there's all these structures, and it's not just, you'll often hear a lot of the people on the left side of politics talk about how we're being ripped off with our gas and we're letting it all go offshore. It's not just gas, it's our entire economy. We are bleeding money, our earnings, offshore. And then we borrow the money, and if you know what a balance sheet looks like, you've got an asset over here, and then you've got debt and equity. We're paying offshore all this interest. Our earnings offshore, we should be keeping as equity from the profit and loss statement, and then we borrow it back as debt, and then we pay interest on that, which then goes offshore, no tax on that either. Right? I mean, we allow foreigners to buy water rights in this country, but get a load of this. They don't have to pay capital gains tax on those water rights because there's a section in the Tax Act that says if a foreigner owns a non-real asset, i.e. something that's not tangible, you don't have to pay tax on it. Like you can't make this stuff up. So...
and obviously all this is what's driving our tax up.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Because we've got to cover all the costs.
You've got to cover it. So, the share of income tax as a percentage of the budget since when GST was brought in has gone from 45 cents to 55 cents. And yet again, that was one of our policies. We want to lift the tax-free threshold to 40 grand because our view is if you get out of bed and put your nose to the grindstone, you shouldn't pay tax less than the cost of living. 40 grand's probably been a bit harsh because it's probably more, to be honest with you. But, it's like we tax low-income earners, 3.5 grand on 40,000 bucks, plus take 5 grand off them for super. And they're back sort of below the poverty line again. And yet we will let foreigners, and they haven't, yet again, when I've asked them about Treasury about this and estimates, they've gone, I asked them, actually, this bloke volunteered it, actually. I didn't ask this question specifically, so I think he knew where I was coming from. They haven't updated the tax treaty with Ireland since 1983, right? And Ireland's gone into the EU in 2000. They've lowered their company tax rate, and the ATO does nothing about the big end of town, but they'll go after small business, chasing them up on little amounts of GST and, really drilling our little guys, while the big end of town and foreign-owned big end of town just gets away with it. And that's sort of, what drives me and why I ran for politics. So, but look, the big sort of why did I run for politics is I wanted to make sure our children get the same opportunities our forefathers gave to us.
Yeah.
And we owe it, to our children, to our forefathers who gave us, all of this wealth. And built this country up from nothing to make sure that we pass some sort of form of wealth on to our children. And we haven't. I mean, last 30 years, we let the foreign debt in, we've let our manufacturing go offshore, we've lost our skill base, we've privatised our infrastructure, foreigners own that again. Or if not foreigners, super funds that you can't elect who, if you ever, with your super fund, you never get to elect who controls your money. Yeah. That's just absurd, right? So you've got all these yes men in the ivory palaces of Sydney or Melbourne controlling $3 trillion of our money, just unreal.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
No, well, mate, I really hope you keep your passion going and you keep doing something. I just think it's great to see people like yourself that I always remember growing up and seeing my parents and my grandparents being passionate, They all literally had a favourite politician. They loved them.
Yeah.
They'd come election time and they'd be raving about them.
Yeah.
And I've never felt that until seen you. And every time I see one of your posts, you can tell you're the real deal. You're passionate. You're and I think it's fantastic. I think if we had more politicians like yourself, Australia would be a lot better off. So
yeah, thanks, Duayne. I appreciate that.
Keep doing what you're doing, mate.
Yeah, well, I'm probably going to be out of a job in a couple of months once my term finishes. But anyway, I'll stay on the edges for a while, and if we'll see what happens. But it's sort of hard to let it go. Where I live, so I could quite happily retire from that point of view. But the problem is it grinds my gears that our children are being shafted. That's what grinds my gears,
Yeah.
And I know that the current lot, I say, and I'm not taking sides here. The whole lot of them just don't have the solutions. It's just a punch and Judy show down there. And I get politics, you're going to have a bit of that, but it's all of it, and that's the problem. No one, and this last election was the perfect example. No one's dealing with those structural issues to turn our country around.
Yeah.
And I just fear for our children. They're being swamped, by immigration. They're not getting skilled. They're sort of being told that they have to feel guilty and all of this, culture warrior stuff that I don't particularly like. But at the same time, I can't sit there and say, well, I'm not going to have my children told they should be ashamed of their country or our heritage as well. Not saying it's perfect, but as we know, our parents made a lot of sacrifices to get us where we have today.
100%, yeah.
And to somehow sort of run down their efforts and not sort of make them, children. So I said this in my maiden speech. The Roman orator Cicero said the greatest virtue of all is gratitude. It's the father of all other virtues, and we have to be grateful for what we've got, not sort of scorn and tear down, what our parents and forefathers built up.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I know you've got to get going, mate. I definitely could talk to you all day. You mentioned before, people getting in to try and get the next press release or news media that in 24-hour period or whatever. And that's something else that I saw growing up. Politicians had long-term plans.
Yeah.
It wasn't just an overnight or a 3-year sort of thing. They set things up to make the country successful for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And now it just seems to be that it's just they're there for their little bit of time, and that's all they're focused on. And whatever decisions they make, they don't care the flow-on effect of that. I don't know if I'm.
No, that's exactly right. There is, and I mean, actually, I was running that line. I was saying we are a party. You know, People First is a party with vision. We've got a plan for that vision. We have the know-how for that vision. But you've got to have a vision, because if you've got a vision and you tell people where you want to be, that gives them hope and it gives them a sense of purpose. But too often now, it's just like looking at the opinion polls and see where they're going. And the opinion polls is just a point in time, and opinion poll in itself isn't an outcome. You know, it's just a means to an end, which tells you who's going to have the power. But you know, you don't want people having power if they don't know what to do with it. And that's the thing. That's why we need to go back to people with having a vision. And you know, I mean, I'm talking to a builder here, but if I had to summarise in one word what we need to start doing again, it would be building. You know, and building those big infrastructure projects that we desperately need, you know, big dams, big power stations, big baseload power stations, you know, ports, roads, like from where we are, I would love to build a tunnel from here out to Stradbroke Island. You know, they want to know how we're going to pay for the Olympics in Brisbane. There's 100 kilometres of Moreton Island, Stradio Island. I know some of your listeners probably get offended by this, but don't have to knock the whole place down, or, you know, but just that coastline there and a tunnel east to west across Brisbane, we could have basically, you know, coastline from Coolangatta all the way up to Rainbow Beach, maybe not quite with Noosa. You know, we've got to start utilising it and lifting the value and all of that sort of thing. So, but, you know, yet again, tolls today, 2 million people in Brisbane paying $5 a toll, 100 years of time, it'll be, you know, tunnels, this is for tunnels only, not main roads. 5 million people paying $50. The government holds on to that stuff. That's how you pay, you know, the state government holds on to it. That's how you pay for the recurring costs of schools and hospitals, because as those costs go up, you naturally, just as your population grows and through inflation, collecting more money from your infrastructure assets. That's what Bjelke Petersen did when he opened up the Bowen coal deposits and the Weeper bauxite deposits. When you opened them up, you got royalties from the coal, you got charges from the trains, you got charges from the ports as the ships came in to take them offshore. 3 lots of recurring revenue to pay for schools and hospitals. Same for the bauxite deposits. Actually, Leo Hilscher, who was the treasurer, said you can't export bauxite. You're going to have to only export alumina or aluminium. So that meant they had to, you know, build up those smelters at Gladstone. So they created an industrial town in Gladstone. I mean, we need that type of long-term vision. I mean, I love, you know, I know it's a bit of an eyesore, but I love that Riverside Express in Brisbane. That was built for $8 million in 1974. Can you imagine trying to get through Brisbane without that Riverside Express? Yet again, where's the vision to do that stuff? You know, Wivenhoe Dam, just, you know, we haven't built a serious dam in this country in years. It's just alarming. Seriously,
we need to get you in on the weekend. Like, I don't know, it's to me, it's just all common sense.
I know. But what it is, it goes back to the Franklin Dam decision in '83. Put aside the decision about the environment. Bob Hawke went to the High Court and said, basically, so that Franklin Dam had become a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So Bob Hawke said that if we sign a treaty, the federal government signs a treaty, foreign treaty, we can override the plenary powers of the states. Now, it's the states that build everything, right? So any time now the state government decides to build something, the Environmental Defender's Office in the state that we fund will go to the federal environmental department and say, oh, there's a rare frog there, you can't build it. And then under some treaty, foreign treaty, you won't be able to build a dam because of some rare frog. And so nothing gets built. I mean, we saw that last year in New South Wales with a gold mine. A New South Wales miner paid $190 million to get environmental approvals to build a gold mine. Then it was disputed by an Indigenous person who the local Indigenous people claim wasn't even from the area. And so they overrode the state government, state government to disallow the gold miner from starting that gold mine. But here's the thing, the gold miner paid $190 million in regulations to the state government, doesn't get that money back. So it's kind of like you're trying to build a house and then, you know, for some reason, you know, someone decides to take a disliking to you, goes to the Environmental Defender's Office and then stops you from doing it, but you've already paid, you know, $10 million in fees to the state government. You're like, well, you're going to give me my money back now that you stopped me from doing it? You know, and so we have all of this red tape, green tape, blue tape, you know, between multiple levels of government that just makes it a nightmare. I mean, I suspect you probably have to deal with do you have to deal with federal laws as well as state laws as well as council laws?
Building codes,
three bloody levels of government for a country the size of 27 million people. I mean, Great Britain's just under 70 million people. It's got 2 levels of government. New Zealand has 2 levels of government. We've got 3 levels of government. You know, we're just so over-governed, it's insane.
Yeah, mate, I could definitely talk to you all night. We'll wrap it up.
Yeah,
'cause I know
okay,
you,
thanks,
I know you got to
mate. Yeah.
get going, but I really appreciate you taking some time out to come and have a chat, and we'll see where things go, mate. I really hope you stay in it somehow and keep
Yeah.
pushing your what you believe in, because that's what we need. We need people that believe in things, and like you say, have a foresight of what's going to happen in the future. Like, that's what this country really needs, people like yourself. So
Yeah, thank you.
guys, thanks for listening. Continue to make this Australia's #1 construction podcast. Like, share, subscribe, all those types of things. And look, depending on when this podcast goes out, if you haven't seen it yet, make sure you come to my event on Friday the 30th of May. It will be the greatest event the construction industry has ever seen, because we are putting the real people in front of you that you need in front of you to understand the changes that are coming into the new building code. Look forward to seeing you there.
Are you ready to build smarter, live better and enjoy life? Then head over to livelikebuild.com/elevate to get started.
Everything discussed during the Level Up podcast with me, Duayne Pearce, is based solely on my own personal experiences and those experiences of my guests. The information, opinions and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. We recommend that you obtain your own professional advice in respect to the topics discussed during this podcast.